Hi everyone, no news today, so let's get straight into the data. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So starting off with fear and greed, you can see we did step up a little bit here today, up to a 38 from a 31. Pretty substantial move. You can see markets did catch a bit of a bounce. We talked about that being a potential opportunity on the Sunday video. And sure enough, here we got a bounce. Still seeing fear on strength as well as breadth. Put call ratio didn't move very much. Volatility pulling back into neutral. We'll see if there's any levels that are interesting there on the charts later. And then looking at safe haven demand, no changes, and no changes here with junk bond demand either. Moving over to seasonality, you can see we were supposed to have bottomed last week, but it seems like this has kind of shifted to the right a little bit. We're over here on the 22nd, and this is supposed to be a bullish period. We didn't get that initial bottom all the way until the Friday session of last week. And then we're supposed to get a bit of a push, maybe a potential pullback, and then a rally into the end of the month. If this is shifted to the right a little bit, we should be looking for a week or two of potential bullishness and then bearishness in May. Speaking of May, you can see that seasonal weakness pretty much throughout May up until the very last week, and then you tend to see a little bit of bullishness going into June. But overall, May is a pretty weak seasonal period. Moving over to earnings, you can see there was not a ton here. Verizon beat on the bottom line, missed on the top line. Otherwise, nothing major. But tomorrow, huge news. We have Visa, Tesla, Pepsi, GE, Texas Instruments, Philip Morris, Lockheed Martin, Sherwin-Williams, General Motors, UPS, New Era Energy. Pretty much all of these are going to be relevant to markets. And then if you hold anything overnight, you're going to be affected by Thermo Fisher, which announces on Wednesday morning. And then tomorrow after hours, you have Meta Platforms. Qualcomm doesn't give you a pre-market or after hours for that one. But IBM, ServiceNow, AT&T, Boeing, always interesting, especially recently. And then you got Waste Management, General Dynamics, Chipotle Mexican Grill, always interesting. And the list goes on. So pretty heavy week here for earnings. Moving over to the economic calendar, there was nothing here for today. And then looking at tomorrow, you can see some economic data. Global U.S. manufacturing PMI, global composite PMI coming out at 945, new home sales at 10 o'clock, that'll be interesting, and then 10-year note auction at 1300. And then for Wednesday morning, you do have durable goods orders, oil has been interesting recently, and then 5-year note auction in the evening tomorrow. Moving over to Max Payne, you can see we did talk about this Sunday, but these massive put walls way out of the money, 300,000 and 150,000, I don't think we're going to get anywhere near those. But the 500 level does seem like the zone where we're headed. 500 to 505 makes sense. Max Payne is right at 505. Put call ratio very high at 3.45. That did go down a little bit, but it's obviously going to be elevated with these massive put walls way out of the money. And even if you look closer to the money here, you can see the put walls are definitely taller than the call walls. First call wall is that 505 area, and then above that you have 510. So between 500 and 505 seems to make sense for this week. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps, you can see we ended up getting a pretty bullish day, 0.92 to the upside. We got momentum rolling to the bull side. So now if this momentum carries through all the way to completion, we should get at least a week or two of bullishness off of this move. Doesn't mean that we couldn't see pullbacks or retests in the same zone and then head higher. And of course, we're still going to be dependent on earnings. If earnings breaks that structure, then we could absolutely see markets head lower. But right now, you can see we did get a bit of a change here on the hourly chart. We're above all the short-term EMAs. We retested VWAP and the 9 EMA on the hourly at the end of the session, held those levels. We're right at that 500 level after hours. If this breaks, then we could push to 505, and then we'll start to see resistance at 506.59, and then the 200 SMA up at 509.78, which is right at my 509.77 level. Moving over to the Tasty charts, you can see that bounce that we got here today. Really no volume on it. You can't see anything there, but on the volume-weighted MACD, we did see a step to bullish, which is good. Based on this, you would expect a retest of the ATR stops, which is at 517.97. Obviously, it doesn't give you any kind of time frame on when that would happen, but that would be your price target for resistance here at this point. I think that'll probably happen over the next 2 weeks or so if I had to give it a guess, which is pretty decent. That's a 3% move over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then I would expect rejection from there and then the seasonal weakness in the May time period. But right now, it looks decent on the daily. 4-hour chart, you can see we're right in the middle of the range. Bullish momentum, ATR stop right now on the 4 hours at 505. So maybe we get here, reject, establish a higher low or a double bottom, and then we rally up to that 517 area. But right now still looks good on the 4 hour. And then looking at the hourly chart, you can see we did move over into bullish conditions. So we took out those ATR stops at 498.59, hit that upper ATR band, pulled back to the 8 EMA, and now we're starting to rally a little bit after hours. So your upper ATR band in the short term would be 502.06, which gives you about a 0.5% of upside, at least in the short term. Moving over to the NASDAQ, you can see a very similar setup. Rallied pre-market, dipped in the early morning session, rallied up mid-session, hit that resistance, and then pulled back. Still holding above the 21 and 9 EMAs here on the hourly chart. So getting a change of conditions, not as bullish as the SPY, but the NASDAQ was weaker on the Friday session and weaker for the whole week last week. But 416.54, that's your current support level. And you can see we touched that trend line almost to the penny and then rejected from there going into the end of the session. So that is an important trend line. So far it's rejected. You can see the inside candle still bullish. Momentum rolling to bullish. So again, just like the SPY, if we did get a follow through, I think we could probably head up into that 437, 480 area. And then we'll see how it reacts once that RSI hits the SMA. So inside candle looks decent going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to the Qs, similar thesis. You can see we did have an inside candle, which is a bullish setup. And then we are pushing up to that ATR stop, in my opinion, around 440, which again is a pretty decent move, couple of percentage points to the upside. If we can get it, that would actually retrace most of the down move right up into that same consolidation here from the beginning of April. And then you would expect a topping pattern and then lower lows to come. 4-hour chart, basically the same thesis. Overthrew that on the Friday session, rallied up here on the mid session today. Didn't quite get to the midpoint. Medium term ATR stop is at 425.88. So that would be your point here. Hit that as resistance, get a slight pullback, hold some EMAs as support, and then push into that daily resistance. And then looking at the Qs, just like the SPY, you can see bullish ATRs here. ATR support is at 413.54. Got above the 8 and the 21 EMAs as well as the midpoint. Tested that 55 as resistance and then rejected from there at 420.86. Now we're bouncing around that 419 area. Upper resistance for tomorrow would be 421.94. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, Russell got a confirmation candle up 1.12%, very bullish. Hit the 9 EMA and rejected a little bit. We're right at the level 195.15. We're up a little bit more after hours. At this point, I would expect a little bit of a rejection from that 9 EMA, either a higher low or a double bottom setup. And then we should get a bigger push higher, momentum rolling to bullish. It does look good here on the Russell. And it was even more bullish than the SPY or the NASDAQ. And then looking at the Dow, again, gap higher, rally, 0.68. Looking at VWAP and the 21 EMA up there, right in that 386, 387 zone. 21's at 387.06. You can see momentum looking good. RSI breaking out. Seems like this has some more room to the upside. If this zone breaks around that 387.77 level, my next one is 392.44. Moving over to stocks that moved here today, you got Ford Motor going up 6.1% here today. Big move for them. You can see it's actually been in a pretty bullish channel here since October, down around $9.72. And since then, it's rallied all the way up to almost $14, pulled back here to 12, and now it's rallying back towards that 13 area. Very strong candle, momentum swinging to bullish. Seems like this is going to overthrow this zone around that 13 area and head towards that upper resistance, which would be around 1450 or so. Seems like a really solid move potentially here for Ford Motor. And then Pepsi, it's been on a run for 3 days. We talked about this before. Big breakout, retested higher low, gapped higher, and it's had a massive run. 3 candles in a row over 1%. It's at resistance 176.75. If it breaks that level, this is off to the running here in my opinion. This has been consolidation and looks very strong. We're almost overbought, but this setup looks very good, and I think it would pull in some buyers here on Pepsi. Remember, we talked about Pepsi having earnings here pretty soon, so keep that in the back of your mind, but structurally this looks very good. Moving over to the Mag 7, no big surprise, looks very similar to the NASDAQ. Up 1.59, retested the 333.21 level, inside candle. Momentum didn't roll, however. That's a little bit concerning. You would want to see a continuation, get that momentum to step towards bullish. Then you could expect a little bit stronger swing. Right now, just looks like an inside candle, which is still bullish, but I want to see that momentum confirmation, and it's pretty clear that the Mag 7 is still driving markets. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. I did a video on Apple specifically this morning, so if you want a bunch of detail on the Apple charts, definitely check that out. But here you can see we did get an inside candle. It did close above the level 165.71. This looked super bearish on Friday, closing below that level. But right now we're holding at it. Inside candle, could potentially see a bounce from there. Still bearish momentum and bearish RSI, but you do have to respect the inside candle setup at support. And then looking at Tesla, this has been a dumpster fire. Move down, bear flag, move down. And this last one has been super aggressive, down 3.4%. Momentum and RSI, super bearish. Oversold conditions after hitting the trend line. We talked about that trend line being important on the Sunday video as well as the Friday video before that. So we've been watching this for a while, hitting that medium to longer term support at this point. We'll see if anything happens there. Otherwise, if this structure breaks, let's go ahead and extend out that trend line. Your next support would be down around 126, which would actually be right at that support level from that bear flag setup. So we'll see how that plays out. Right now, this looks super bearish. If that zone breaks, you could be headed all the way back to $100. And at this point, it seems like Tesla needs to come out with something beyond just their car manufacturing company. I know they have been working on a bunch of things, and solar does make them a little bit of money, battery storage, but right now nothing is really contributing in a major way besides the sale of vehicles. Moving over to Amazon and NVDA, I've been talking about these for a few weeks here, but these continue to drive price, and you can see with their structures how they are doing so. NVIDIA looks almost identical to the Mag 7 chart, and you can see 4.35% to the upside, holding up markets even with Tesla dumping. Amazon 1.49, pretty much in line, but it did get back to that 55 EMA, which is interesting. Holding that level looks strong. If it continues from that level, 181.41 is the next resistance, and then above that you have 188.61. And right now this just looks like a very short-term correction, and we could get a bigger bounce from these levels. Moving over to staples and discretionaries. Staples on a burner on the back of that Pepsi move, in my opinion. Gapped up and rallied 0.95, looking at that 75.4 area as resistance, bullish momentum, bullish RSI. So decent pullback, found support, rallying through, looks very good here. And then discretionaries 0.44, so we're still in a risk off type environment. Staples running, discretionaries treading water. Momentum did roll to bullish a little bit, but it's going to be hard for discretionaries to go higher with Tesla dumping. Honestly, it held in there pretty well at 0.44, considering that Tesla went down 3.4%. Moving over to financials and transports, both of these catching a bid here today as well. Transports 0.99, momentum rolling to bullish. So it looks like we're getting pretty close to that full-blown retracement. The structure is still bearish, so I do think we're going to make lower lows eventually, but that doesn't mean we can't get a bit of an upswing just like this, where we went from 68 all the way back up to 71. Pretty decent move. You want to catch that if you can. And it seems like we could get a move back up to this 68.50, 69 zone. Similarly here on financials, 4 days of bullishness, 1.21%, retesting VWAP in the 21, still holding above that 40.77 level, momentum rolling to bullish. Does seem like this has a little bit more upside in it, in my opinion. Moving over to breadth, you can see we did get more continuation on these. They looked very good going into the Friday session, despite the fact that markets were selling off aggressively. So we thought we were going to get a bounce, and sure enough, we did. Momentum on both of these looks good. Seems like these are going to be headed back up into these 60 to 68 area here for the 55 average. Similarly here on the 20-day, headed to that 50, potentially even up to that 86 area. Moving over to yields, you can see we're basically flat here today. Down just a little bit, but we're still hovering right at those highs for the 2-year. Looking at the 10-year, still hovering right on top of that 9 EMA as well. Momentum on both of these starting to fade. We did get pretty extended. You can see we hit overbought conditions. Seems like these are going to pull back at least a little bit. I still think we're in a higher rate environment and that this is likely to head higher at least a little. But right now, we've run out of momentum. Seems like we need a little bit of a pullback to regain that momentum to the upside if it's going to happen. Moving over to the dollar, we did get a slight wick high on the hourly chart, but then we pulled back right into the middle of this range, flat on the day, literally 0-0, pretty crazy. You don't see that super often, but we're still at resistance, running out of momentum. Seems like the dollar is going to pull back at least a little bit, which does fit with the overall thesis of a bounce, at least in the short term. Moving over to JNK and TLT, you can see JNK absolutely confirming this rally. Big bounce here today, 0.52, momentum rolling to bullish. Everything looks good there. So equities moving higher, JNK moving higher makes sense. TLT hanging in there, not doing much of anything at this level. Gapped through the level at 89.16. And still below it, trying to bounce a little bit after hours. Momentum's rolling up slowly, but doesn't look nearly as bullish as J&K. Moving over to volatility, you can see the big breakdown that we got on the VIX. Move index still holding basically flat, momentum fading, RSI breaking down. So seems like this is going to pull back a little bit more also. And then looking at the VIX, right at that trend line, critical support. If this breaks down further, we could see more bounce. But if it was going to bounce and give us that double bottom, you would expect it here, establish a lower high, and then kind of pull back into that 14 area. I think makes sense. Momentum fading, RSI breaking down. So volatility coming in. We'll see if it continues tomorrow. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I did okay on the day, up about $700. I absolutely overtraded, but eventually put myself in the right position for the rally that came through. And now I am positioned pretty well going into tomorrow's session as well. I also want to highlight we did finally get daily options on the Russell 2000, which is awesome, especially for my style of trading. You can see here 1 day to expiration. So that's a Tuesday expiration. That did not exist before. Now on the Russell, so you have daily options for the Russell and the NASDAQ. So I'm going to continue to trade it that way. But going into tomorrow's session, I have a 194 put for tomorrow for 43 cents. I was a little bit concerned on that down move. I think we might see a little bit more weakness in the pre-market. Then we'll see how it plays going into the mid-session. I still think we're headed higher at some point, but it wouldn't shock me if we did pull back to a higher low setup and then rally through from there. And then looking at the Qs, I did put some shares back on, managed to make some money on those, and I did sell a 416 call for tomorrow's session for $2. So max profit on that is at 418, but you can see it's in a minus $200 position. So that should come in a little bit. Based on this math right here, it should only be in a minus $136 position at expiration tomorrow if we stayed at this price right now. And I'd still have the opportunity to roll this out and up for tomorrow's session if I needed to. And then I do have some puts on here at 416 for 86 cents. So looking to collect about $160 on that position also. So between the two, still looking at a potential of about $200 tomorrow. And I can always move those positions if I need to. And I still have this longer dated call that's in a slight loser right now. If we do get that dip and we start to see the rally through like I think is going to happen, I can take profits on this call once we go into that dip. And if we don't see the dip, I might assume a second set of shares for that medium term and roll these down and in. That's a potential play for tomorrow, but we'll see how it plays out. Right now, definitely bullish, but being a little bit cautious for a double dip move. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of the charts today. Do you think this break in structure is going to continue, or will we get that double dip, or will we see lower lows? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.